This is Gadget Stop 321, and in today's video I'm doing a pocket fountain pen showdown. Now, I have pocket pens from my collection arranged from least expensive to most expensive, and I'm going to go through each one and talk about the features I find notable in each. Now, just for a size comparison, here is a Pilot G2 gel pen, and you can see that each of these is a little bit to even significantly smaller than that. Now, the first pen I'm going to talk about is from Jet Pens. It is the Chibi 2. It's got a snap cap. Without the cap, it's a little bit small, but once you post it, it makes a nice sized pen. I paid $2.99 for this pen. It uses standard international ink cartridges, so you have quite a few options for ink colors and different brands. And whenever I'm done with an ink cartridge, I don't throw the empty one away, because then if you get an ink syringe, you can refill these, and that gives you even more options when you start using bottled ink. Now, I do want to mention I've been very happy with this pen, but when I first got it, I installed the ink cartridge, and it just would not write. Barely a little bit of ink would come out. The tines seemed to be misaligned, so I bent around on them a little bit and straightened them out, and it was still having trouble with ink flow, so I pressed the nib down on paper to kind of splay out the tines a little bit to spread them apart, and when I did, it cracked the barrel here a little bit. It writes really nice now, and on Jet Pen's website, I left a review and I mentioned the experience that I had, but I still said it was a good pen. I recommended it, and Jet Pens, without me asking, sent me a new pen. I haven't used the new one that they sent me because this one still works well. I may give the new one to someone as a gift. Now, stepping up a little bit is in price. This is the Pilot Petite one. I paid $3.80 for this pen. It's got a little more fit and finish to it than the Chibi. But from Pilot puts out quality stuff. I can't complain about any of the Pilot pens I've used. Snap cap, and it posts really securely. It actually snaps on. It's got a nice sized section. Now, the nib is not very ornate. It's a pretty plain nib. It's a very unassuming looking pen, but it writes really well. Now, this pen does not use standard ink cartridges. It uses a proprietary Pilot ink cartridges, and since this pen is so small, these small ink cartridges only work in this Pilot Petite one. Actually, they work in the fountain pen version, and there's also a felt tip marker version of the Petite and a brush pen. These ink cartridges work in all of those. This is just a little protective cap to keep the ink from leaking. But this is a nice, inexpensive pen for someone just getting started, or if you want to get it as a present for someone. I got 3 of these for some students of mine, and I got them a set of the cartridges, and they had been interested in my fountain pen collection, and they really liked them. The next pen is also a Jet Pens branded pen. I paid I think $12.50 for this one. Now, this one's metal. It's got some heft to it. It feels like a good quality pen. Snap cap. Let me show you how big it is unposted. And then when you post it, it's a nice size pen. Now the grip section is smaller than the Petite. It's a little less comfortable to use for long writing sessions, but for quick notes and this is a nice pen to use. The heft really makes it feel good in the hand. I heard a pen reviewer say one time that the larger the grip section, the more comfortable the pen will be for writing for long periods of time, and that is true. On a skinnier section, you tend to grip it tighter, but this is a nice pen to use for short writing sessions. All the reviews I read about this one talked about how smooth the nib was. Mine was not. I had to smooth it out a little bit, and I'm kind of ashamed to tell you how I smoothed it out. This is a cheap enough pen that I didn't have the materials for that people use for actually smoothing nibs, like Mylar or micromesh. And I saw on a YouTube video, or I read on the internet somewhere, that you could flip a ceramic coffee cup over and smooth it. I would only do that with a very cheap pen, and this was a relatively cheap pen, and now it writes fairly decently. It could use a little more smoothing, and the next time I place an order from Goulet pens, I'm going to get some micromesh and Mylar for smoothing some of my more feedbacky pens. The next pen in my collection, this is a Ohto Tasche. Ohto is a Japanese company. Now this is an aluminum pen, snap cap. It uses standard international ink cartridges, not usable without posting. This is a little rubber O-ring that allows it to post really nicely. Once you post it, you've got a nice size pen. The only downside for this pen for me is that this aluminum is just really slippery. This is nice for quick little notes, but for long bits of writing, this tends to get uncomfortable. But I do get lots of compliments on this pen. The next pen in my collection I got from Goulet Pens. This is a Moteverde Poquito. Now, it was originally it listed for $25, and I got it on sale for $20. Snap cap. It's got a little inner cap that you can kind of see. Allows it to post. When you post it, it's a nice size pen. The downside on this one is it's got a tiny little section, and the section is this shiny chrome, very slippery, but since it's so small and so close to the nib, I don't hold the section when writing. I hold it up here. And this upper part is also metal, but the finish on it is not slippery at all. I really like it. It's pleasant to write with. The only downside of this pen is the only nib option you had was a medium nib, and that for me that's just a little bit too large. I prefer fine and extra fine nibs. In fact, all of these so far have been fine nibs. Now, one thing I really liked about this pen was it is, very pleasant to cap and uncap. Very satisfying click there. That was a Moteverde Poquito. The next pen in my collection, this is the first fountain pen that I ever bought for myself. This is a true pocket pen, a pen that you can throw in your pants pocket. It's plastic. It's a Kaweco Skyline Sport. And it's an unusual looking pen. This one, the lid screws off. When it's unposted, it's okay to use. It would be comfortable to use. The section has a nice shape to it, and it's not overly small. It's just very pleasant to hold. When you cap it, it just pushes to post. It makes a nice, very comfortable size pen. This is an extra fine nib. The only downside of this pen is I've had issues with hard starts. Like the first letter that I write, when I start writing with it, it may not write the letter. Then I try it again and it writes just fine. One other downside is that as I write, if I write a full page of text, the ink tends to get fainter as I go down the page. I guess you would call that ink starvation. The feed has trouble keeping up with the writing, but it's not a major issue. This is one of my favorite pens. I like to carry this around in my pocket. I paid, let's see, about $25 for this pen. It was $25 or $27. That's these Skyline Sports and Classic Sports run about that, the plastic pens. The next pen is a Conklin Minigraph. Now, I debated on getting this pen. I read a review of a woman who got one of these from Goulet Pens. I had been on the waiting list forever, waiting anxiously for this, and when it became available, I read a review that a woman said the feed was seriously misaligned, and when she got it, it was just super scratchy to write with. But Goulet Pens was great. They took it back, exchanged it for her, and she got a great pen in return. And I thought, oh, what are the odds of that happening to me? Well, let's see if you can see here. The feed is seriously misaligned. It was scratchy as can be, but I didn't have the patience to send it back and get a new one. I smoothed it out myself. It's a little bit feedbacky now, but it's pleasant to write with. And like I said, the next time I place an order, I'm going to get the materials I need for nib smoothing, and I don't think I'll have a problem. One downside is chrome sections. I'm not a fan of. This is very slippery, but once it's posted, I tend to hold this one up on the, I guess this is a resin. Basically, it's a plastic. I tend to hold it up here, and it's not slippery at all, and it's pleasant to write with. Another downside is you've got metal threads here and plastic threads inside the cap. Be careful when you're putting the cap back on. You don't want to cross thread those and damage the plastic threads inside the cap. Let me see, I don't think I've been mentioning it. So far, all of these pens use standard international cartridges except for the Pilot Petite one. All Pilot pens use their own proprietary ink cartridges. Let's see. My next pen is the Kaweco Liliput. Kaweco pens are made in Germany, and this was a dream pen of mine for a long time. I'm a big fan of everyday carry type stuff, and so this, like the Skyline Sport, is a true pocket pen. This one's made out of metal. It's got a screw cap. Notice you have to twist it several times to unscrew it. It's not a pen you're going to uncap quickly, make a quick note, and recap it. This isn't really intended, I don't believe, for quick notes because not really usable without posting. And there are threads here so that when you post it, it makes a nice size pen. It's about the diameter of a pencil, so this tends to be one of those pens that if I use it for a long period of time, I tend to grip it really hard and it fatigues my hand. So for medium length writing sessions, this is nice. I do have the same issue with this nib. These are both extra fine, both of my Kawecos. I got the extra fine nib, and I have the problems with hard starts and minor ink starvation if I write for an entire page. But I just love them so much. They're such cool pens. The next pen in my collection is another Pilot. And let me back up to the Kaweco. I don't think I mentioned how much it was. This was, I think I paid about $52. The Kaweco Liliput comes in many different finishes, and the prices vary widely depending on the finish. The black one, I've always seen it around $50. I paid $52 for mine. The Conklin Minigraph, I paid $40 for it. Okay, back to the Pilot Prera. This is a cool pen. It's a demonstrator pen, meaning you can see all the inner parts. Like any other Pilot pen, it uses proprietary ink cartridges. Now, the Petite one had to use these little tiny ink cartridges. Most other Pilot pens, I guess I can just say most, use this longer ink cartridge. That holds quite a bit of ink. But the pen also came with a converter. Now let me go ahead and show you. It's a nice size if you don't post it. It posts, the cap really kind of almost snaps on there, posts nicely, makes just a perfect size pen for me. Now, instead of using a cartridge, I'm using a converter. It's got a little piston that you can screw down, dip the nib in ink, draw the piston back up and draw ink with it. Instead of inking my pens up that way, I use an ink syringe. I just draw the ink out of the bottle, remove the converter, squirt the ink in it, reinstall the converter. Then you can watch the ink working its way through the section. That's a cool thing about this pen. And this pen, the nib sizes that it comes in are fine, medium, and a stub nib that gives you kind of a calligraphy flair to your handwriting. I got the fine, and it writes like a needle, which I love. So if you're a fan of the finer nibs, the fine nib on this Pereira is awesome. The next pen in my collection is a Twizz B Diamond 530. It's also called the Twizz B Mini twist cap. It's a decent to use pen when uncapped. It's got threads on the back threads on the back to put the cap, and it makes a really nice sized pen. A downside for me on this pen is that the section's made out of aluminum, kind of like the Ohto Tasche. It's slick. So for lengthy writing sessions, I tend to have hand fatigue from keeping my hand positioned. But the nib is awesome on this pen. I got the fine. You can also get it in an extra fine. I got the fine. It's a lot. It writes a lot wider than the Pilot fine. The Pilot fine writes really narrow, but this is an awesome pen. Now this pen does not take ink cartridges. It has a built-in piston. It's a piston filler, and it actually comes with a wrench that you can disassemble it, clean out, maintain the parts, grease up the piston. It's just an overall cool pen. Now, let's see. This is the most expensive pen in my collection. I keep forgetting to tell you how much the pens were. This one I paid $62.50 for this one, I believe. And I was on a waiting list for this one for a while. Now, this was a limited time color Twizz B periodically comes out with different colors for their aluminum trimmed fountain pens. Right now, if you want to get one of the mini fountain pens in aluminum, it's yellow, and it's a cool looking pen too. If I didn't already have one, I would have picked one of those up. Okay, back to my most expensive pocket fountain pen. This is the Pilot E95S. This was my first gold nibbed fountain pen. I put this in with my pocket pens just because of the size, but I would never put this in a pants pocket. Maybe a shirt pocket, but I really don't take this pen out of the house. I paid $134 for this pen. It has, hold on, let me see. It's a fine nib, 14 karat. It's a 14 karat gold nib, and it's just an elegant looking pen. You see when it's posted. Unposted, it's not really intended to be used unposted, but when you post it, it's just a cool looking pen. It's got an unusual nib, and it's just a pleasure to write with. I generally use this for writing in my journal, and I keep it just here in the house. But that is my pocket fountain pen collection. If you liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you would like to see more videos like this, subscribe to my channel. And if you have any questions or anything to say, just leave a comment below.